folks, Aaron from Beansprout here. I'm here today to talk about vintage banjo ukes. And mainly I'm going to talk about how the heads are tensioned and all the different mechanisms people invented to try to make that happen. Talk about a little bit the history and culture behind this instrument. The reason I've been thinking about this a lot lately is I'm starting a research project looking into a guy named Alvin Keach, who's one of the people who claims to have invented the banjo uke. And so it got me thinking about all these other little instruments that are in the shop. And I thought I would kind of just show all these different things and talk about the history. So both Alvin Keach and then another guy with the last name Bollinger both kind of claim to have invented the banjo uke. Kind of both happened in California around the same time. And already at the time, people were putting other necks on banjo bodies and making hybrid instruments. That was already a thing. We already had banjo mandolins, guitar banjos, 4-string banjos, 5-string banjos, all these different things. Banjo basses, whatever. So with the ukulele being so popular in the teens, it was just a matter of time till somebody made the connection. And because there was such a big crossover between California and Hawaii at that time, it seems like a no-brainer that California would be the first place that people did this. So we'll talk about those California things in a minute. To begin with, what I'm talking mainly about is that a banjo is basically a drum with a neck on it, and this drum has to be tightened or else the bridge sinks and the instrument's not playable. Most folks nowadays use a synthetic material here, but the traditional way is calf or goat skin. And the companies that were already making a living building banjos at the time, many more of them in the Midwest and East Coast, made their banjos with tensioning mechanisms like this. You've got bolts through here to a shoe, and then with a hook and a nut, and then the hook and the nut pull down on a tension hoop, and this tension hoop stretches the skin head by pushing down on a flesh hoop. So those are all things that we're going to talk about a lot today. But these early California ones, they didn't do it this way. It's as if, like, even though somebody already knew how to make banjos, they thought they'd do it a different way. I think it might have been the need for a lightweight instrument like an ukulele and the need for an inexpensive and portable instrument, because all of this metal is heavy and expensive compared to an ukulele. So I think these California people were trying to find a different way to do it. We'll talk about this one a little bit more in a few minutes. So the first one I want to show is this instrument labeled Rolando. And Rolando is a brand that was sold by the Southern California Music Company. They were a big retailer, Los Angeles, I believe. And I'm pretty sure that the way this one is tensioned is the same way that is on the Bollinger patent. So this instrument might have been made in the Bollinger factory. I don't know the connections between Rolando, Bollinger, whatever. But the main issue is to push up on the goatskin head to make it tight. It's got this ring, and the ring is pushed up with just nuts and bolts, kind of hardware store stuff. So it's easy to deal with and adjust. Now, when you put a new skin on, it goes on wet, and then overnight that wet dries and it gets tighter on its own, but it still needs to be tighter yet. And so the way this one is done is by pushing up on this ring from the inside. And then it makes a nice clean look on the outside because you don't see any of the other hardware. It's pretty lightweight. This one actually I think is mainly made of redwood, which I think is really cool. It's got a 3-piece neck like I would do, and it's actually got a staved block rim construction, which I think is really cool. And this one is pretty fun to play. Very lightweight. So anyway, from looking at the Bollinger patent, I think it's this, where it pushes up on the ring. Okay. Other ones from in a similar vein. Whenever I see banjo ukes like this, I just think of them as California-style banjo ukes, even if they're made somewhere else. But this one is even simpler. It's a wooden ring, and then on the top here, there's a groove underneath this, and then this metal plate is held on with screws. And I have a little, there's like a little flesh hoop inside here. So when you tighten the screws down, it pulls the metal plate down, and that tightens the head. Problem with this design is that if you've taken a screw in and out 2 or 3 times, that hole gets too big and it doesn't keep tension anymore. So I had to replace the screws with thicker and deeper screws, and eventually that's just going to fail. So it's not an ideal long-term solution, I think. Other folks who've done ones like this that I think are really successful, instead of just a screw into wood for each of these, they have like a metal insert inside and then a bolt that goes into that metal insert. So all you're tightening and loosening is just metal on metal. I think that's a good plan. So that's nice and lightweight. And I was able to get this one pretty tight overnight. I've seen that one before. Now another one that looks kind of from the outside like you can't see anything This one is labeled Sterling, and so Sterling is a brand that comes from Tonk Brothers, I believe. Tonk Brothers is more of an East Coast Midwest firm. I don't know about Tonk Brothers activities in the West Coast, but it has a 3-piece neck like this, and I've seen this 3-piece neck on some other West Coast instruments, and I think if I remember right from what Tom told me, it might have been out of the Sherman Clay make. But anyway, this one has got a different mechanism altogether. You've got to put the skin in here, and then this hoop pushes the skin against this ridge, and then you tighten this bolt to expand this ring wider to make it tight. It looked to me like it wasn't going to work, but it's working pretty good. And then this one also has like a little resonator plate that's supposed to get screwed to the back to help amplify it. So that one says Sterling. So that's 3 mechanisms for tensioning the head already that aren't the normal one. So clearly someone in California is like trying to find a way to do this cheaper and easier than the other way. Okay, so we have to talk about Keach a little bit. Keach made instruments in California, but then they moved the whole operation to England, and most of the instruments I think were made in England. The Keach instrument's pretty cool because you see this wooden hoop, but actually the wooden hoop is kind of just camouflage. The majority of the instrument work being done is done with internal mechanisms that are just bolted to this hoop. So at the very inside, there is a cast aluminum ring here that has all these holes drilled into it, tapped into it. There's been a fair bit of machining that's had to be done to this. That holds on here. We've got a little tension hoop and flesh hoop, kind of like a normal banjo. So inside here are the hooks and nuts from a normal banjo. They're just hiding. And just what holds it all together is this aluminum rim. Now this one that I got from my friend, the wooden hoop is so out of round, it's just like unusable as a reference point for what is square and straight, and it's just like warped. So I think really the key is to get everything bolted back to this aluminum insert as best I can. Now I have a theory about this. Keach's father was a mechanical and electrical engineer for a big Honolulu shipping company, and they did like boiler works, and they had foundries, and that would have been a big industrial concern, and his dad was a well-known kind of industrialist dude. And I'm wondering if Keach was able to get these cast and machined somehow through industry connections, because this is a unique piece of kit. It's not like the other stuff, which is kind of hardware store vibes. So the thing with the Keach is you do all this, you get this pretty tight, and then another ring goes in. This is real thin kind of sheet metal with a rolled hoop on the top, and then that presses up against the skid head and is tightened up by, one second, it's tightened up by connecting this plate down into that aluminum casting. So tightening these other set of hooks and nuts pushes this interior hoop up to make it even tighter. So it's kind of a complicated system. You've got 2 different sets of hooks and nuts. I can see why people would get mixed up by it. I haven't gotten this one officially up and running yet, but I'm on my way. I'm just curious about the hoop being so out of round, if I'm going to be able to make it work. Also, the aluminum casting is held into the hoop with some screws, and all the screws, like the other screws and the other ones, had all stripped out, so I had to add different sized ones. So that's the Keach. Stay tuned for a lot more on that. I'm doing a lot of work on him right now. The next thing would be like the one I showed earlier with the traditional bolts, shoes, hooks, nuts, tension hoop, flesh hoop, skin head. This one is made by Lion and Healey Company in Chicago. They already were making tons of banjo-style instruments, and they started first by importing ukes, and then they made their own ukes, and so I could see why they would go to this. In general, I find this design to be superior to all these other little things we're talking about. And if you look at a Gibson, they're this style, and if you look at like another early thing, maybe stuff coming out about the Reitberg and Lang company in the Northeast, they made some banjo ukes that got sold under other people's names. I think these are better. You'll see ones in this style sold as a lot of times from the Midwest and from the East Coast. So, you know, like all the Gretsch banjo ukes, all the Slingerland Mabel banjo ukes, that sort of thing. These Lion and Healey ones are a step above that in quality, and the Gibsons are well known as fancy as well. So this is the style that I use right now to make my instruments. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways to make a banjo uke work in the shop today, and it's been really fun for me to dig into this. I think I'm going to get all these up and running and playable just for fun so we can hear them all. And especially I'm going to get this Keach going because I'm really working on him a lot this year. I appreciate your input, and if I got something wrong, feel free to message me. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.